Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Frank Fear. This is Mountaineer Locker Room, then and now, as you know, and you're going to see Greg Crist, I think, shortly. Greg's computer was giving him some issues, and so he's getting ready to log back in. But we're very pleased you're with us. It's Wednesday night, May 14th, and we were just talking with our guest tonight in the back room, Keenan Cummings. We're so pleased to have him with us. How busy it has been. We think about this as the off season, but it's just great because there's so many things going with football recruiting, and Keenan's going to talk about that. Basketball recruiting, both men and women. We talked about that on the show, and we're going to start talking just a little bit about baseball because it's on everyone's minds, and people are nervous. Big weekend coming up Friday, Saturday, and Sunday against the KU Jayhawks. WVU in first place in the Big 12 by 2 games now, 3 left in the regular season before the Big 12 championship. That the Not the championship, but the postseason tournament. And I see Greg is here, so he's going to join me, and then we'll pick up talking about baseball. There he is. He's back.
Yeah, I'm back.
Well,
decides to reboot every Wednesday night at 7 o'clock for some reason. Right as soon as we
well, that's habits. And I was saying, Greg, that the Big Ten postseason tournament starts next week, and we hope the Mountaineers will be the 1 seed. And if so, we get a bye on Wednesday, and we start Thursday. It's a single elimination, but with 3 games left, believe it or not, KU, if they sweep, will tie for first place, and Arizona State that's in second, 2 games out. KU is 3 games out. Those games this weekend are really important. But the more thing I'll say is, and I looked at we all know that the issues have been late innings, really collapses with the pitching. But I looked at the Big 12 stats today, and guess who's number 1 in pitching in the league? It is West Virginia. So it's that end of game situation, Craig.
Yeah, and it's the people that have been solid all year, closers and so forth, that are faltering down the stretch now, and I don't know if it's fatigue or people figured them out. I don't know what it is, but yeah, hopefully, if I understand correctly, if we win one of these three, or Arizona State loses one of their games, then we win the league, which I think is really important to give us a little extra rest, and hopefully get those pitchers lined out. We're playing them at home too. That's a good thing. I feel pretty good going into the weekend. I think we got in a good place to be, and I think we need to have. It would be nice to win the conference and then have at least a decent showing in the tournament.
Baseball America is essentially, they're predicting as you go into these postseasons that WVU will be one of the top seeds, lower seed. If this plays out the way that Baseball America, which is the gold standard when it comes to college baseball.
These games we lost, probably 4 out of the last 6 or 7 we lost. Could have easily been won. I mean, we were leading.
Let's put it that way. Against those teams, even last weekend, winning. See it on the.
He said he wanted 3 to play, but when it comes to quarterback, I think ultimately this is going to come down to
the offensive line. Has really been a focal point for him as well. Well, we welcome you back into the Mountaineer locker room then and now. Frank, had a little technical difficulty, so for those folks who were watching previously, I'm assuming there was a little bit of they saw, and now we're back starting all over again. So we'll go from the top. I'm Greg Crist. That's Frank Fear, and we have a great guest tonight, Keenan Cummings, on with us to talk about um, the beloved transfer portal and everything that's going on with that in football and basketball. And Frank, I know we talked earlier, Keenan and I talked about how folks like him, it has to be head spinning trying to keep up with everything that's going on in this transfer portal.
It's just how can we put it, Greg? We haven't seen anything like this, and so it's new to all of us: the coaches, the beat writers, people like us, fans, everybody, players, and it's just very difficult. In fact, I've talked to a number of fans, and they said, it's hopefully this will be the pause that refreshes. They're paying attention, but this time of year, we're usually at the point where we're getting serious about the too deep looks like. We're looking at what other teams are and where West Virginia fits into the mix. You can do all of that, but there's so many question marks. It's just going to take time.
Yeah, and you just watch it daily, and you hope that, and you have faith in your coaching staff that the players they're bringing in, will be good players and able to compete. And I know we'll get to all this here in just a moment with the number of people on the roster, seniors, et cetera. But it's I think for fans, it's extremely difficult to adjust to and get used to. I think the coaches, based on what I've heard from Coach Rodriguez and some of the assistants and some of the press conferences they've given, is that it's just the world we live in, and they've adjusted and are figuring it out, and obviously we're not in it. We're not in it alone. Everybody in the country is going through the exact same thing, and it's just a crazy time. And you hope with the settlement coming in, the revenue sharing, and maybe somewhere down the line a salary cap, if you will, for lack of a better term. You hope that stabilizes some of this, and it at least gets it in a fashion that we can understand it, and not that it matters whether we can understand it or not, but it's easier to put a program together and build a program and coach. Now it's you just wonder how much of that there is that you're building. It's hard to build when you have 50 new players every year. So you hope that some of these things that are coming down the pike in the future with revenue sharing and the other things I mentioned, you hope that it offers a little bit of stability to the whole thing. And I think I think that's in everybody's best interest. I think fans would like that much better. Players probably would. I mean, can you imagine if you are a college player and you're looking for that NIL and you're a good player and you're out there in the portal and maybe you're not getting as many looks as you thought, or not from any place that you want to get them from. It has to be tough on the players too, and then changing places. I mean, that's not an easy thing to do either. You may be at Oklahoma State one year and then West Virginia the next year. So that's a big adjustment for the kids as well. So it's just tough on everybody, and you hope that somewhere down the line here in the next few years there is a little bit of stability. And I'm anxious to hear Keenan's take on that when we get back to him. What he sees in the future, what he sees coming down the line. Again, he is a lot more in the know than we are, and hopefully has a better handle on what's going to happen.
Well, people like Keenan, top drawer as he is always valuable, even more so this year, because as we were mentioning, as you mentioned, we had technical problems. And I was mentioning on the earlier feed, which you won't be able to see anymore, that, WVsports.com and also the X feed that the Keenan has, just more valuable than ever before in terms of keeping fans up to date. And, there's the old saying, the more things change, the more they stay the same. That doesn't apply to college sports. This is a new reality, so you're absolutely right. Why don't we bring Keenan in, and we'll get back to it and hear from him.
Yep, Keenan, welcome back, and sorry about the glitches there. We'll try not to be overly repetitive, but we won't be able to go back and see the earlier things that you talked about. I wanted to go back and touch on some of those things. One, the number of people we're talking about being brought in, and then the number of seniors, juniors on the roster, et cetera, et cetera. And I'd also ask you about the different types of players, whatever the case may be with the players coming in now as opposed to years past. So I'll just turn it over to you and let you get us caught back up.
All right, I will try this the best I can. I think that the thing that's important here, guys, and I think I'll start here, it is a new era in college athletics. It's very apparent. I said this last time I was on with you guys. It's never been easier to rebuild a roster quicker. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to rebuild it successfully and it's going to lead to 10 wins in 1 year, but you give yourself a chance. And I think that's something that Rich Rodriguez and his staff recognize. They've embraced. And when you look at what they've done so far, they've added 64 guys to the roster. That's transfers, freshmen that'll enroll, at the end of the month, the junior college players, 64 guys. If you add the 12 guys that the former staff signed that are still with the team or will join the team, 76 players since December.
Wow.
I mean, that's if you go back, 5-6 years ago, that's 4 or 5 recruiting classes. I mean, there used to be counters too. I mean, you could only add 25 guys each year. So, I mean, that took 3 recruiting classes to get those kind of numbers. And the thing that I've noticed, though, and I will say this is different than what I saw under Neil, and I don't want to mean that Neil didn't do this to a degree.
Right.
But Rich is really forcing competition. He's bringing in guys that want to win, guys that he thinks can help him win now. And I asked him about that in the spring. I said, when you guys are out looking for transfers, because everybody does it differently. Everybody has different plans. I said, do you look for guys that have multiple years, guys that can make an impact right away? Is it a mix? And he basically just told me, we want guys that can help us win. We're not worried about their eligibility. We'll figure that out later. They want guys that can help them win. And if you look at the guys they've added, they have 41 seniors on the roster, and 36 of those are new. 5 of those guys started their career at West Virginia, 36 of them.
Wow.
Now, there's a couple holdovers, Tarnew's back, getting that extra year of eligibility, but most of them are brand new transfers to the program. And juniors, I believe the number is 24, 26, I believe, something around in there. So you do the math there. I mean, that's a lot of upperclassmen that weren't there for West Virginia. They lost a lot of pieces from this roster and had to replace a lot of people fast. And the thing that I've noticed, and it's really apparent, is, I thought it was funny. You ask Rich, I asked him towards the end of the spring, what positions are you going to target? And, it kind of sounded almost coach speak-esque, well, look at everybody except quarterback. Guys, look at what they've added. Quite literally every position on the roster except quarterback and punter. Every other spot, they've added guys. And I think that speaks to what they're trying to create. Competition, culture, they're buzzwords, but I think they have meaning with what Rich is trying to build. Running back's a perfect example of this. They had 3 guys. You had Jaheim White, Ty Edwards, and Dior Hubbard, who I've heard they've liked quite a bit. But you know what they went and done? They added 3 more. They want competition. They want the cream to rise to the top. And I think that by forcing that, you're not necessarily designating, hey, this guy's going to be your starter. We're going to find some guys to fill out the roster. It's, hey, we have this spot. We're going to bring in guys to compete. And if you earn it, you get it. and there could be multiple guys playing. Obviously, they want to play with tempo, but it's apparent to me that it's more than coach speak. He is absolutely trying to make this the most competitive roster that he can in his first year atop the program.
Yeah, I think that's you look at the folks he has brought in. A lot of it's hard to say they're top-notch players, but if you look at what they did last year, you don't always know from where they come from or the competition they played against. But some really good players, and like you said, more than just one or two at the positions, but several of them. And one thing I'd ask you about before we went off was the offensive lineman. It seems like that's been a real emphasis from the beginning, even up until now. This offensive line, I know his offense really, of course, any offense is predicated on how good the offensive line is and what they can do. But there's a certain type of lineman that I think depends on. It's not the the 6'6", 320-pound guy. It's people that can move and zone block and those type of things. Are you seeing that? As far as linemen are concerned, am I wrong in the fact that he's brought in a ton of offensive linemen?
No, you're not wrong at all. I mean, you look at what they lost last year. They probably couldn't even field an offensive line with what they returned.
Yeah.
They lost almost 13,000 snaps in their career. They lost their top 6 options. Those guys were gone. Then they lost several key reserves that they thought they were going to depend on. So the only way to do that is to kind of develop the guys you got and then bring in some help. They brought in 11 transfers, guys, 11 on the offensive line. It's a mix. You have some young guys that have potential. Robbie Martin's one of those, Aiden Bussell, some other guys that they brought in that can help. And then they brought in some really, really experienced guys too. Some guys that have played at high levels, some guys that have played a lot of snaps in their career. And now it's about kind of mixing and matching and seeing which one works. I started doing depth charts. I waited a while this year. Usually I start that in February is my first release. You could forget that this year. There was no way. I released my first one for offense this past week. Mm-hmm. And when I was first struggling to find guys to put at certain spots, now after the spring rush, you're starting to feel better about the depth. Now, obviously, like you said, it's got to translate. Guys have to earn roles, but you feel better about at least the makeup of the room. And that's what they had to do. Rich said at the end of spring, they need 8 guys, at least 8 they can trust. They're a lot closer to that 8 now, I believe, than they were when spring ended.
Do you think, and I kind of feel this way, but do you think it's been helpful for the defense? We have quite a few players come back on defense, so there wasn't a ton of focus on defensive players being brought in, but mostly have been on the offensive side. And of course, he's Coach Rodriguez, known as an offensive genius. I feel pretty good about the fact that our defense has some returners, and he can focus on the offense and get his type of player into the skill positions and that sort of thing, and the line. But is that, you think that's going to work in their favor, where he can focus on the offense in this portal?
Well, I think it's been kind of a mix, really. I mean, I think they hit defense really hard the first time. They added a lot of DBs. They added some linebackers, some edge rushers, and they kind of filled some of that in this second window. So I like the pieces they've added there. Obviously, he has a lot of trust in Zach Alley, kind of gives him the keys to that thing. And I think that it shows you the commitment. I don't want to say growth because that's not necessarily fair, but that was one of the knocks. When Rich was here, it seems like he was focused on offense and defense was, kind of there at times. But I think that there's a clear commitment here. They want to be aggressive. They want to be attacking. And they've gotten some pieces that can really help them there. You can never have enough pass rushers. You can never have enough defensive linemen. You just can't. I don't care what you return. You can never have enough defensive backs that can cover. And those are the spots they really hit heavily. And even spots they did have guys coming back like linebacker, they still have added some pieces. So I think that that's going to help. And, he kind of is giving the keys to Zach and his staff. And that, Rich is obviously, he's going to have his hands all over the offense. He's the head coach, but he's going to be the offensive coordinator. He's going to be the guy that makes the decisions there. So I'm comfortable with what Rich does on offense, and I'm optimistic with what they've done with defense. Now, obviously, we can look at numbers, we can look at snaps played, we can look at all that stuff, and in the end, it doesn't really mean much until guys actually put it out on the field. But from what they've been able to gather, kind of what they've plucked, they've got guys from every level, Power 4, Group of 5, FCS, Division 2, junior college. And I think they've gotten some really, really good pieces. I actually feel a lot better defensively, especially in the secondary. That was a really concerning spot, cornerback room. And I think they've added 7 or 8 transfers, to fill that out. Right now in the cornerback room, there's not a single player that returns last year that played any snaps. So it's completely brand new with transfers and some guys, conference players, All-Americans at points in their careers. So I feel better about what they've done, and I think that they would too, if you ask them honestly.
Well, based on your assessments, and again, maybe putting you on the spot here, but are there any of these guys coming in? Of course, I mean, we know about Jaheim White and Nico, but are there any of these the transfer guys coming in, people that stand out in your mind, and maybe people that we should be looking forward to?
Talking about offense, defense, both?
Yes, offensively.
Well, I like Cam Vaughn a lot. Cam Vaughn was a leading receiver for Jacksonville State last year. He obviously has experience in the scheme. I think he's going to play quite a bit. They've added some other receivers too. I think that's a room that right now is kind of jumbled together, but they've got some guys, like a guy they added recently, Logan Rampart. Everybody kind of forgets about Jaden Bray because he was injured last year, but I think he has a chance to be pretty good offensively. I really like the receiving tight end they added, Grayson Barnes. Not really the mold of kind of the Jacob Barrick blocking type. He's more of a receiving threat. I'm really interested, excited to see kind of how they use him, because that's the one change that is really different this time around compared to when Rich was first here. The tight end was basically, an extra blocker, or they used a lot of fullback. Now they use a lot of 11 personnel, 12 personnel. They haven't necessarily thrown it to the tight end a ton, but I think if you have those options, it'll be interesting, with a guy like Grayson Barnes or even Ryan Ward, who they added from North Carolina. And the running back room is pretty exciting too. I mean, there's a lot of names there that you can kind of sort through that have had success other places. Ty Edwards was one of the highest graded transfers, at least according to Pro Football Focus, that they added. He's a bigger back. Jalen Knighton had a really good career between Miami and SMU. Yeah, Cannon Katzer was very good at Ferris State last year, and obviously that's a jump. And maybe the guy that nobody's talking about is Sincere Bowers, the junior college guy they added. Now, he's still got to be eligible to make sure that he's able to get there in the summer. But if he does, I think he's kind of a perfect fit for what Rich wants to do offensively. And then I know everybody's going to ask about quarterbacks. Right now, guys, I think that position, if I had to pick one, it would be Nico, just due to the experience and what he brings to the table. But I think Jalen Henderson's going to have a say in that. And it wouldn't surprise me. Rich has done it before. If you see more than one quarterback take some snaps this year.
That's interesting. I think people are excited about what there is to come, and I know when I see these names. Of course, I've learned too from looking at these, when you see transfers come in, they play them up and they show up on game day, and you're like, well, it's not exactly what I expected, but I think looking at some of these guys and being able to see their past play does make you excited. And I think most people are really looking forward to this coming season. I just think that even though we've had to rebuild it, and it's going to be tough. It's like I told Frank on there one other time. Everybody since Rich is coming back, everybody expects us to go 11-0 and win the Sugar Bowl, and that may not happen in the first year. It may take a little time, but I think people are excited about Mountaineer football being what we expect it to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think if you look at, the one thing I can say is just they're going to play hard. They're going to be physical. It's going to be a brand of football that I think. I mean, everybody's seen it before. You know, if you followed football, West Virginia for any time, you know that those West Virginia teams under Rich Rodriguez were a team that others didn't want to play. Now, how many wins does that translate to? I don't know at this point. I think that preseason projections right now, when you're turning over basically 3/4 of your roster, is almost impossible. You're just guessing off production, and a lot of those things. You look at that, guys. You go, how much production is returning? What did they lose? And then what did they bring in? Well, the bring in is like significant this time. And it's really going to be how they all translate, how they all fit together. But I think there's more options now than there were even heading into the spring. And I think that's what they wanted to do. It was clear that they meant it. They were going to go out and get in the transfer portal and be aggressive in the spring. They did that. They landed some really highly recruited guys. That second window, there's not necessarily as many players. There's some good ones, but they went out and tried to get the best ones that they could get, guys that other Power 4 schools were all over, and they landed quite a few of them. So I think you feel good about that, and you hope that continues into the summer and puts them in a position where, they can compete in year one, because I think Rich and his staff, they truly believe that, you can win now, and win now. That's a open term. What does that mean? But we'll see. I think the brand of football, though, is going to be something that people are going to easily relate to.
Yeah. Good, Frank.
You stick
in the leadership role, and
they got things together pretty quickly, and you can do that with the amount of roster turnover you can do. And West Virginia's got a pretty attractive thing to sell. The Big 12 is a wide open league. They've got spots for people to play. Some of the guys they've added that are pretty high impact transfers. And it's kind of what I was talking about before is I felt like in the past, West Virginia would get a certain amount of guys and, all right, this is what we've got. We've got 6 wide receivers. This time I kind of went in with that mindset. All right, they've got, X amount of tight ends, X amount of running back, but they kept adding guys that can possibly help them. And I think that only thing that's going to do is increase the competition and make the product better.
Yeah.
Keenan, I know it's way too early, but it's almost like I shouldn't go to the cookie jar and grab a chocolate chip cookie, but I have, and it's looking at what the rest of the league has. And so I looked at a number of publications recently, I think 6 of them, which teams they think going into the season have the best chance to grab the league title. I just wanted to run these by you. I mean, this is really a shot in the dark, but to see what you're hearing. They were in 2 tiers, at least as I see it. The top tier was Arizona State. No surprise given what happened last year, going to the college football playoff. Kansas State and Texas Tech. Texas Tech is just killing it in the portal. They have so much money compared to many of the other teams. And in the second tier is BYU. No surprise there given what happened last year. TCU and Iowa State. Is that in the ballpark in terms of how you're reading the tea leaves?
Say that's probably where I would slot them, but all you got to do is look at last year, guys. Arizona State was picked last, won the league. I mean, it's crazy how crazy this is now. You rarely saw that before. You saw teams surprise, but it's so hard nowadays. I've had people ask me, well, what do you think about this team? What do you think about that team? It's so hard enough to keep up with the own roster that you cover that you don't really have a beat. You do a lot of the same things I was mentioning earlier. When you're slotting these teams preseason, you kind of look at who's returning, who they brought in, and then do a lot of guesswork. And I think those preseason media polls and preseason polls probably hold less value than they ever have in this climate, just because we're all projecting. There's been plenty of transfers, can't miss guys that were supposed to be great that haven't done great. And then there's been guys like Beanie Bishop who kind of slid in, had a subpar season at Minnesota, becomes a consensus All-American at West Virginia. So it's so hard to project, and a lot of it is teams meshing too. I mean, it's a big factor here. Culture, meshing. Sometimes teams have great pieces. They're not great together. So that's where I trust, and kind of goes back to my general point about Rich. He knows how to build a program. And I think that he will be able to do this the right way and kind of get things together the way he wants to. Obviously, you're going to have to go out and win football games. My dad always said talk is cheap. It takes money to buy whiskey. So I think you got to go out and win some games. And if they do that, I think it's going to win over any fans that have a little bit of sore feelings. Winning cures everything.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. Switching gears just a tad, basketball wise. I know right now you're consumed with the football, but I know you obviously watch the basketball as well. What's your thoughts on the new coach there and what he's putting together? I've noticed one thing about the basketball roster is how big these guys are. He's bringing in a lot of big guys, and I think that's one thing in the past that we've noticed that we didn't always have that size to match up well in the Big 12, but it seems like he's focused on getting some big physical dudes in there to play.
Yeah, speaking to Hodge, I really like the guy. I've got to talk to him when he was introduced. He's very polite, great, really personal guy. Think that he's going to do well here. He understands how to build programs kind of in the same sense that Rich Rodriguez has. You come up through junior college where you're basically rebuilding your rosters every year. At North Texas, he was head coach there 2 years. He had to replace basically his entire roster each season. So he's done it before. You look at what they've already done, it kind of speaks to that. They already have 10 guys, Trayson Eaglestaff, Honor Huff, Brennan Laureate, Harlan Obioha, guys that West Virginia was linked to pretty much as soon as they were in the portal. They were able to get those guys. And when you look at the roster construction, you mentioned the size. I do think they're pretty big in a lot of spots, versatility, and they have shooters. Not everybody's going to check those 4 boxes, but for the most part, the roster checks those 4 boxes. They got a lot of guys that can shoot, space the floor. And I thought it was interesting. I was talking to Jaden Forsyth, and one of the big things, kind of one of the, I guess, drawbacks that people had with Hodge when he was at North Texas was his pace of play on offense. They were more deliberate. And, I talked to him about that when he was hired. I asked him, was that a product of the personnel? Is that how you want to play? And he pretty much told me, if they want to compete for championships at North Texas, they're not going to get down the floor and outrun Kansas or Gonzaga. They had to play that way. You get better athletes, you get better players, you can increase that pace of play. And Jaden Forsyth told me one of the things he really liked about the plan is they want to get out in transition and run. So I think anybody out there that wants to see a faster pace of play than what they used at North Texas, I think you're going to get your wish.
Yeah, I think that's exciting too. I think we're looking forward to basketball as well. I know I am, but I want to ask you too, and again, I know a lot of speculation, that sort of thing, but where do you see all this heading? I mean, you pay attention to it. We try best we can, but where do you see all this this coming to a head? At some point, it has to, I would think, stabilize. I mean, I know we all hope it does, but what's your thoughts on as far as the the effects of the revenue sharing and those type of things? What do you see next 3, 4, 5 years?
I think eventually, as long as the House settlement is approved, there is a pathway for this to at least stabilize some. Now, obviously, that's still up in the air. Who knows what happens with that? I think the expectation is that will be, but once schools are able to control it in-house, they're supposed to be able to regulate these third-party collective deals more and things like that. So I think that'll cut down on some of that. You'll be able to retain your players more because, there's a salary cap in a sense. Now, NIL will still be a factor, but as I mentioned, it's expected. I say expected because I truly don't know, but to be more regulated. So I do think that it's going to help it because right now, I mean, guys, we just have an unsustainable model in college sports.
Yeah.
I mean, Rich and anybody else that's talked about it is not wrong. It's open free agency. It's kind of pro football without the strings or the binds that make pro football. There's not contracts. Guys can take an NIL deal in December and leave in April if they want to.
Yep.
I mean, it's the nature of the beast. And right now, I'm just not sure how long that can last. I do think that, at least for football, coaches want to see one transfer portal in the winter. I'm not sure if that will happen, but usually it tends to do when coaches are all on board with something. That's something they'd all like to see. I think that would cut down some of this madness this time of the year. You'd pretty much have all the craziness right after the season, and then you'll go into kind of a period where you're working with the roster you have. They've made some changes to help, with the transfer portal windows. It hadn't been that long ago that the transfer portal was open year round. You could go in any time. Guys entered it in August. West Virginia added a guy like Tony Fields in August, back when Neil was the coach. So that's better already. They've cut down on when guys can enter, so that's helped. But that span, guys, those couple weeks that's open, it's a week or 10 days in the spring. I think it's 30 days or whatever, 15, 20. It all runs together to me right now. But in the winter, it's a madhouse. It's just, and it's the best way I can describe it is everyone's always like, how this happened so quickly. I mean, once guys enter the portal, it's not some kind of secret information. Coaching staffs have guys that are all over that. They get in contact with them. You try to get them on campus as quick as possible, and then you try to get them in the fold. It's basically you have a position. You scout most of these guys in advance, guys you think are going to be in there, and then you attack it. It's speed dating at a rapid pace, and you'd like to see that kind of get to more structure, because if you're building your team with a lot of guys that are new, you want to try to get to know them a little bit better, and I don't know how you do that with the current situation, because it's nuts, guys. It's absolutely just nonstop. I feel like I've just been stuck in the transfer portal. I mean, even though spring practice was in there since December.
I can't, Frank. Frank, you're muted there. We can't hear you. I'll give you a chance to get unmuted, but yeah,
there we go.
There he is. There he is.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Frank.
Well, I was going to say, I don't know how that happened, but technology is technology. I agree with you completely, and Greg asked a great question. Here's the concern I have. I think the fly in the ointment now could be the fly in the ointment in the future. There are crazy things about membership organizations. The members are going to have to work together, and clearly there are two members who want to be able to call all the shots, and that's the Big Ten and the SEC. So we got the House settlement that comes through legal action. What happens if the stability that comes with it, the Big Ten and the SEC say, this is not as good as it was when it was before. So the concern I have is that they'll start throwing their weight around again, because the NCAA has shown they have no ability to control those two conferences. They just can't. I mean, it started years ago when after the situation at Penn State, the NCAA levied a financial sanction against Penn State. Then they had to walk that back a few years later. And ever since then, they've really been very reluctant to do almost anything. And that's why the court proceedings are so important, lawsuits, because that's a path to change. So, yeah, we need more stability. But I guess I would say is that sometimes stability doesn't serve the big boys. They'll want to destabilize it again. And that's my concern. In the end, I think, how do you manage, and can you manage the SEC and the Big Ten?
Yeah, that's a question above my pay grade. I would not. Yeah, I wouldn't even know where to begin there. But you're right. I mean, in a sense, it's going to be a problem. You'd hope at some point that the leagues could work together and make it. I've always said this, and I would like to see this at some point. If there could be some changes, maybe you could regionalize this thing again. Maybe revenue distribution. I know that obviously there's legal loopholes there that they'd have to overcome, but at least it's being talked about a little bit. Package it like the NFL. Regionalize it. We're going to an NFL model and I'm not necessarily saying in the structure, in the way that I guess television and these two leagues treat each other, in a sense that they're kind of treating themselves like they're a mini NFL, but it's not really the same. I know TV numbers, people are going to watch college football playoff. I get that. But for me personally, as a sports journalist, I'm not going to say, oh man, I can't wait to watch that Ohio State Oregon game as I would, a Chiefs Packers game. It's the appeal's not there. The college sports, to me, it's regionalized. You care about your team and other teams it affects in the national picture. But I think that's what's missing right now. I don't know where that element went out the window, and we've kind of given up tradition and regional rivalries and really some of the things that drew me into wanting to cover college sports. We're in an era now where I'm supposed to care about Rutgers versus UCLA. I don't care about that game.
Right. Yeah, we've had that discussion on here as well, and we've we concluded, and we know best that the regional games, uh, you know, in our minds, and of course, again, the SEC, the Big Ten may not look at it the same way, but would much rather see games like Pitt, West Virginia, West Virginia, Virginia Tech, yeah, UCLA, USC, those type of games, as opposed to seeing West Virginia, uh, Kansas State, and it just seems to me like it would be such an advantage not only for the fans but the universities as well. I think revenue wise, I think that would be much more attractive, um, for the TV markets and that sort of thing if they would do it that way. And I've said that all along. They need to regionalize it, make divisions, do it like the NFL, and let your playoffs come from these division winners and wild cards and things of that nature. I think fans would like that, and I think the revenue would be uh, more than adequate.
I think the one thing that helps here, maybe for the future, if you want to get to a situation where that could potentially happen, again, it's me just throwing things out there. But if everyone's talked about the super leagues forever, if there is a breaking point in this, you're going to find out the schools that are truly committed to college football through this revenue sharing, the teams that really want to invest, and maybe that narrows this Power Four type model down to 48 teams or whatever. And if you get to that point, maybe you can break it up into two type of divisions. But again, this is me hypothetically projecting things that I truly could never. But that would be the way to kind of, I say this phrase a lot when it comes to college realignment. You need to go backwards to go forwards in a sense in college sports. And I would like to see something like that eventually. You hope that West Virginia's included. You don't want to be left out. Obviously, you'd like to see the current model if that becomes the case. But if you can get to a point, because it's obvious to me, it's obvious to anybody that follows West Virginia that they are committed to being a high-level Division I program. They're investing. That they're making it a point to matter. Winning matters, and I think that Rich has said that several times this spring. They didn't bring me back for nostalgia. They didn't bring me back. They brought me back to win. And if West Virginia can win in major sports, that perhaps there is a pathway to that in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Well, sure going to be interesting. I know that. And
I can guarantee a lot of things are going to change between now and then.
Yeah. And the good thing is, I guess, I don't know that it can get a whole lot worse. I guess it could, and probably shouldn't say that. But, when you look at these, the transfer portal, those type of things now, you figure it can't get much worse than the situation we have right now. So hopefully whatever does happen will at least make it somewhat better. And I think hopefully it will. I think there's, not just casual fans like myself, but I think people in the field, the experts like yourself, can see, if something's not done, what's going to happen. And I think that everybody wants good stuff to happen. Everybody wants, college sports to be college sports and teams to have a fair playing field and that sort of thing. I think everybody wants that. So hopefully, some more reasonable things will come out in the future. And like I said, solidify this whole thing a little bit more. Frank, you want to finish up here before we sign off for the evening?
Well, I would just say, Keenan, thanks so much. We're almost guilty asking you to come on, knowing all the work you're doing. And I'll just encourage everyone to go to WV Sports, WVSports.com, and go to Keenan's X feed, because it's excellent stuff. It's always fresh. It's thoughtful. It's comprehensive. And the great thing, I think, too, to put the cherry on the top, Keenan, is that you don't insert yourself in terms of, okay, now here's the situation according to Keenan. You do a great job of describing, profiling, analyzing, and it's really up to the fan then to draw an interpretation. So it's really, it's like going to school and having a good professor in front of the class. So we appreciate you taking time, and we asked you last time. I hope we can get you back again, because you raise our IQ, no question about that.
Oh, I appreciate that, guys. I have to hang that over my wife's head because she's a teacher. I'll just start calling myself a professor.
Yes, Professor Cummings.
I think, frankly, it would benefit us and our viewers alike to have him back at least every other week to get us filled in on the new roster.
Might be every day.
That's right. Every day. You know, Keenan, over the last couple of days, Greg and I were talking, and we said, you know, when we were getting ready for you, we said, you know, the good thing about Keenan is that he's putting his stuff out there every day. What if Keenan worked on the staff of the print version of Athlon Sports? And you gotta put your stuff together and then have it on the newsstands. They usually come out the end of May, early June, and that's it. I mean, how long is that kind of publication going to even be around because of the how quickly things change?
Yeah, it's a funny story about that. Yeah, I have done that, and I think that now it's so hard. You have to make changes so rapidly, and not just minor changes. You look at, as mentioned, the offensive line for West Virginia. My first depth chart projection is entirely different than what it looks like 10 days later. I mean, it's insane, and it's such a rapid pace that you almost have to kind of throw depth charts out the window until really the first game of the season. Because anymore, coaches have no incentive to give those. They never really did, but you know, it kind of was a thing to get fans talking. Now, I mean, you put out a depth chart, you might scare a guy off. You might not bring guys in. It's complicated, and it's just change, guys. Change is the one thing that's going to be consistent in college sports until this thing settles.
Yeah, that is for sure. Keenan, thank you so much. Great stuff as always, and seriously, we do look forward to having you back. Hopefully before football begins, and we can fill in the gaps at that point, maybe in August. And again, just a wealth of information, and folks, you need to check out his work. Does great stuff. We appreciate you taking the time to join us. We know you're extremely busy right now, so we appreciate the time.
Thank you, guys.
All right, Keenan Cummings, great job. Frank, I tell you, listen to him, discuss these players and positions and knowing what he knows. I just can't imagine trying to keep track of all that. I just, even if you're there every day, it's probably worse if you're there every day because you're seeing it, right? You know, people are walking in the door right past you every day. What a job. My goodness.
Yeah. You know, it's, you run so fast. And what happens, they often say speed kills. And I think one of the things, and I'll talk in a few minutes, our guest next week, and he thinks a lot and deeply and has the knowledge. What's going on? Where's it going to go? And I think one of the issues here that we need to talk about in more detail next week is if you're tiptoeing to a pro model, then have a pro model. Don't go half the way, go all the way. Right. So, for example, it has already come up. It came up at Oklahoma. It came up in Colorado that there would be, rather than having a spring game intra-squad, that there be a spring inter-squad. So Oklahoma would play Oklahoma State, Colorado would play Colorado State, something like that. Well, that's getting into the preseason, the NFL preseason. And the other thing is, Charlie Baker is president of the NCAA. I'll tell you, Roger Goodell is not the president of the NFL. He's a commissioner. And the same thing with baseball. Same thing with hockey. And if you're going to move in a certain direction and you're on that road, then just basically keep on walking. And, because I think what's happening now is we're getting to the point that not that interest is getting frayed, but it's starting to show. I hear it from fans. It's starting to show. We got to have more stability. The game has changed so much. When does it change too much? before it's not the game we knew, it's some other thing. So
Yeah, and ultimately, I think that people will lose interest at some point. Not totally, but I think there'll be, fans my age, for example, who are not super fans, but fans and watch, that will turn off to it because they just don't, they just can't follow it, and they just can't, and they don't get to know their team and their players and that sort of thing. And I think when that, if that would start happening again, then something got to change, and money talks. And I just you just hope that there's enough cooler heads out there that understand uh, what needs to be done. We're not experts by any means, and we speak to it from a fan's perspective, what we would like to see. And I personally think what we've talked about, what we would like to see would be successful. And I'm like you, if you're going to do the pro model, then do it. Let's do it and be done with it, and
mm-hmm.
get this thing situated and stabilized. And that way, I think that not only do you keep your fans that you have, but you start growing even more fans because it becomes more interesting in my
Mm-hmm.
mind. I just think what's happened now is and I'm not going to lie, I love Mountaineers and love football and love college football, but sometimes it's hard to get excited for West Virginia and Kansas or West Virginia and even Iowa State or any of those teams. It's just hard sometimes to get excited about them because you're not. It's just not the close rivalry and you don't know the fan bases and it's just different. And I think ultimately you're going to start losing people if it continues where not only do you not know the opposing teams, you don't know your own team, and that makes it tough to get excited for.
Yeah. Well, Greg, that's a perfect lead in to Darren throwing up the graphic of next week's guest, because just like if you could put that up a little bit bigger, Darren, that would be great. Because there it is. Thank you. That Keenan is focusing on West Virginia, does an excellent job, and Tony does the same thing nationally, and he is the leading what I would call college football and basketball, particularly football analyst. He's an analytics guy. We've had him on before. He's brilliant, and that's just one example. That chart, you can't read it, and that's really irrelevant. But what it is it looks at 10-year growth across the conferences, revenues in green and expenditures in red. And so when he talks about the future, it's always grounded in, okay, what are the data telling us today? It's almost like, someone serving on the Federal Reserve, they look at economic data and decide whether they're going to increase or keep interest rates the same or lower them. And that's exactly what Tony does for college sports. And so we're really pleased to have him with us next week. And let me just refer you on the bottom there. You can go to his X feed, TJ Altimore, and he's posting every single day. And a very thoughtful guy.
Yep. Looking forward to that. That's going to be interesting and fun to talk to him. And again, what a tough job, trying to keep track of these teams and what where they're headed, how good they're going to be, et cetera, et cetera. There's no way to do it, and it'll be interesting to get his take on what's coming down the line, because I'm sure he's on top of it, and we'll know. One last thing, Frank, before we sign off. When we started earlier, of course, we had some technical problems, but we talked about the baseball team. I want to remind everybody, big series last of the year coming up this week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, against Kansas State, and West Virginia needs to win at least one, or Arizona State needs to lose at least one for us to win the conference outright, and then going into tournament time, working our way towards a regional hosting, which would be awesome. So make sure we mention that again. Since we talked about it earlier, then we lost it.
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to all Mountaineer fans. We need your support. We know we have it, but the baseball team. Let's look at it as we talked earlier about just a couple of games with 1 or 2 innings, usually just one, going sideways. But this team is it's 40-10, and it's one of the winningest teams in the country in the top 2 or 3, and they're projected now by Baseball America to host a regional. They're projected as one of the 16 teams that would host a regional. The Big 12 tournament. Hopefully they'll be the 1 seed and they won't play next Wednesday. They'll play Thursday. It's a single elimination, and so we're just gonna watch tomorrow night ESPN Plus, and then Friday and Saturday, and then hopefully next week we do the same ESPN Plus, and then the championship games on ESPNU on Saturday. So a couple of really big weekends coming up for Mountaineer baseball.
Yep, sure is. Can't wait, and we can talk about it some more next week. We'll have a better handle on where we're heading. So look forward to that. Look forward to our guest next week. That's going to be a lot of fun. Appreciate everybody tuning in tonight. We apologize again for the technological problems we had at the beginning. Darren got it all sorted out, and was happy to have Keenan Cummings on with us. Does a great job filling us in on the portal and what's going on and all that with the football and basketball programs. Wealth of information. People need to check him out at Rivals and read his information. Does a great job. Frank, enjoyed it as always. And again, we thank everybody for tuning in. I know we have a little promo here at the end. I think you do. We'll get that out of the way before we sign off.
Hi, everyone. Frank Fear here from Mountaineer Locker Room Then and Now, and we're pleased to be part of the Voice of College Football National Network. Mark Rogers and staff have done a great job with the network, and it's constantly adapting and expanding to bring content to you. Many of you are already following us on X and Facebook and Instagram, and if you're not, here are the URLs, the links to go to and take advantage of all the great content that's there for you. Even if you do that, you may not know some of the new doings at the Voice of College Football Network. One is a new podcast options that already thousands of people are taking advantage of. You can get it on Apple, Spotify, and other podcast networks, and we encourage you to do that. Perhaps the biggest drum roll is the new Voice of College Football website with plenty of content, everything that you want to enjoy and can enjoy about college football. And remember, one thing that makes the Voice of College Football Network different is that we're 24/7, 12 months a year. It never ends. It's college football in the winter, the spring, the summer, and of course, during the fall. We also want to announce, and Mark Rogers again and staff have done a great job with this, a relationship with Amazon.com. And here's Mark to tell you more about it.
You can make a difference here at the Voice of College Football. Use the Amazon link. Financially contribute to the Voice of College Football without spending a penny. Same shopping experience. It's easy. Go to any video on any channel. Go to the description section and grab the link right next to the capital letters that say Amazon. Use that link, and Amazon will instantaneously convert to your account, settings, history, everything intact, just like whatever link you use right now. No difference. Pay no attention to the product that you see right there. Just go search what you want. Don't forget the Amazon link. Thank you for your support. Sincerely, the Voice of College Football.
Well, that's it for now. Let me thank you for your loyalty. The Voice of College Football Network. This is Frank Fear for Mountaineer Locker Room Then and Now. Hope to see you on our channel and other channels, VOCF. Take care, everybody.